All right, so now we're back into actually targeting. We covered why it's important to target and like 8 million other things. But what we did want to get into is like, okay, let's start going through like the ways you can. And here's where I ran into issues, difficulties talking to people. And I'm not knocking anyone, right? Everyone's got their focus, and not everyone understands like what's available. So one thing I'll use just as a way to help explain the concepts is in Info USA, without spending any money, you can go to their website and you can see like, hey, I could target by geography, right? And when I say target, again, Ryan made a point off the video here. Later, we'll talk about literally getting a list of people and doing it. Right now, I'm using this slightly different. That's what this is for, is to build a list if you wanted to rent it from Info USA, which I don't necessarily recommend. But it helps give you an idea of ways you can segment your audience, right, or your customers. And that's what I wanted to bring up in here. It's a cool tool, how you can think about stuff. So geography is a big one. Oh, basic demographics like age, the month they were born, their income levels, obviously like education, their gender.
As Joe talks through these, think about the characteristics of your current customers and how you might be able to identify them. So for example, if they are over a certain age group, primarily, this could be one of many possible characteristics.
Yeah. And more often than not, which we'll cover in a different document, it's the psychographic stuff. It's not, these are like demographic which you have a high correlation that they are within a certain age. But more often than not, it's a mindset. And it kind of gets back to often also the need they have. Let's say I'm over 65, and I'm worried about the coronavirus because I'm in this certain area group, right? It's my age is a big dictator, but it's because I'm concerned about my health issues, and it's in this and that one. Actually, maybe it is more with the age group also. You can tie it in really well. But maybe all people that are worried about the health issues, hey, you know what? It's people who are really worried about, keeping their hands clean is how we want to target. When we go back to rent the list, we might have to target because there isn't a variable out there that says, give me people that are worried about washing their hands, right? Maybe that's not available. So we would use age as a surrogate for that. Again, so let's look at a couple others here. House financing. It is crazy the amount of stuff that they have available out there in personal finance, mortgages.
The other thing is, Joe showing you these, is that, of course, you can combine them. So you can segment by multiple to really start to narrow down your focus.
Which actually, Ryan, that's a great point. Let's do an example here. Notice this count is updating, right? So when I say I'm going to target 18 to 24-year-olds, I thought it would actually automatically
update count, Joe.
Thank you.
It's okay.
So now we've dropped it down to that, and I want to target people in my zip code. If I knew what it was, do I hit go? I don't know. Oh, that's for there. Let's just hit update, see if that reflects it. Oh, there we go. So to Ryan's point, it's combining across. Think of these as an and going across the different tabs, right? This and this and this. And I know I've talked to Ryan before, and Facebook has an amazing tool, Audience Insights, where you can go through and see things, especially much more like than in Info USA. They have things they've liked, and that can get into much more the psychology of who they are, what they're interested in, what their habits are, hobbies are. I'm not sure what's under.
But hopefully one of the key takeaways from this, both this demographic and psychographic information, is you don't need and you shouldn't think of having a very wide audience. So if you're a computer store, your target audience aren't everyone who wants to buy a laptop or everyone who likes computers. You can narrow it down by geography, by demographic, by purchasing intent, all sorts of different ways.
Right. Now, I get confused, and I talk to a lot of people. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. I think you and I exchanged emails like a year ago or somewhere on this, where we also said at the same time, you don't want to drill down so deep that you're ruling out people that like you would have pulled in anyway. So let's use an example of I have a computer company and I'm trying to create software for construction workers. And is it really different if the construction workers are in my town of Capel versus in Dallas Fort Worth area? Should I list Capel and say, oh, this isn't for people in Dallas or in some of these other cities, right? Like, hey, you know what? The chances are they're going to have just as big a need. I could say Dallas, right? Texas or that, but you understand what I'm saying is,
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
you want
also
to be specific, but not so specific that you kill off other leads that would be like, oh, well, that's me. That's still me.
yeah. I mean, the other thing to say, to sort of build upon what you're saying there, Joe, is it's okay to have more than one target group.
Yeah.
And it may also be that without wanting to add more complexity here, you can do something called A/B testing. So you can have two types of audiences and you can understand who more readily reacts or engages with your content. So you can test A and B samples.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Ryan. I don't know why I didn't think about it, but it's critical, right? I always, when I get into this with people, and especially because I don't want to say I'm a confrontational kind of guy, but I surely don't avoid confrontation. When people, like even my clients, when they're just, no, we do this, I'm like, let's just test it. Let's just do a test, right? Like I will, and I actually at TI, it would drive me nuts. Even people on my own team, I would talk about, hey, this seems like this would be a really good appeal. In my own team that works in email marketing would be like, no, that's not going to appeal to them. And I'm like, I finally have to say, look, I'll bet you $1,000 that my subject line will outpull anything you guys can throw at it. And then they would be like, what? Oh, okay, we'll do a test. And then usually I won, but it doesn't matter. The point is, back it with data, right? This stuff is so easy to split sample test, divide up. Actually, I loved your point earlier was, you mentioned personas a while ago in a different video, I think, but there isn't one customer. There's not, don't ever think of your customers as like, this is it. This is just this one thing. Try to come up with a couple different ones at least, because there's very different mindsets and different people buying your products for different reasons that have different needs, and different, all these things. Create several of them and start figuring out, hey, do these really combine? Are they buying for the same reason? If I don't mention women, if I mention it's men and women, they're still buying for the same reason. If I just mention the reason instead of saying women buying, or, this is where, depending, of course, how many people are working with you and how much time you have, hey, you know what? Go into Facebook, create your ad, mention women in the article, target women, clone it, swap it out with men, and mention men in the article, and the between the two, spend the same amount of budget. I will guarantee you'll actually get a better performance on it, almost regardless of whatever it is you're offering, because by mentioning the keywords in your media, you hone in on them, yet the key is you're only targeting them, right? You're not targeting the men and the women ad, and you're not targeting the women and the men ad. So in both of these, the other thing, of course, it gives you is an easy way to look at the performance differences across those two and say, wow, you know what? I thought it was men and women, and it still is, but you know what? Women are, X more likely to do this. So I might even stop targeting men in general, or maybe it's just a men in a certain age group that I'll still target, because you can break it down by ages and different things.
I think that one of the key takeaways from this conversation here is, and we touched on it on an earlier video, don't underestimate the importance of understanding your customer deeply, and really, really value data, because the data will help influence and inform decisions you're going to make and help you be more focused. So invest in information that can help you focus your marketing spending. And also, just to extend something that Joe was just mentioning, to give a practical example, you might have a product that everyone buys, but you might find that men also buy one other product to a different product that the women buy, or it might be in a different form, that people over 35 buy product A and product B, and people under 35 buy product A and product C. So the way that you present information and opportunities to upsell, or the value that people see in different services or products you offer, will differ depending on all sorts of things, not just demographics, but psychographics, previous purchase history, future purchase history, life stage, all sorts of things.
Yeah, and to chime in on that, obviously upsell, no matter what you're doing, right? Going back to your current customers and getting more money from them is a great way to be more profitable. But you mentioned earlier too, it's the trackability, right? I mean, that's Dan Kennedy says, and he has a list somewhere in his books, but he talks about here are the 5 things that by reading this book, you promise you will always abide to. And one of them is there will always be trackability, right? It's so easy in today's day and age to create a new phone number, right? To have it still go to your phone, but the fact they call into this number versus this number, right? Always have a way, or change the name of the person they're going to contact, even though it's all you. But by the name they asked for, where they came in from, right? There's so many easy ways to tell performance of what you're doing, and that trackability. It's
Right.
mind-boggling that we don't.
You want to know where they came from, so that is a source to double down on if that's a very popular source. You want to know the type of advertising they engage with and the message that works. You may run several messages, so you want to see if you can find a way to target that particular message. You want to understand what products they prefer, what products they buy with what other products, what service they chose out of the 2 or 3 services that you offer, what sort of frequency they may want to purchase again. So collecting all of this knowledge about them. And also I'd also like to say one other thing that we shouldn't also lose track of here, particularly if you're in a smaller business. We're talking here about a lot of data which exists in public records. It's open source often, so that means it's publicly freely available. I wouldn't also discount human intelligence. So in some businesses, they might call this goodwill. So you obviously build a connection with people, a personal relationship, and you actually gather human intelligence one-to-one personally. So they come into your shop and you know about them, and you know that they like the LA Lakers and they hate they hate the Golden State Warriors. So you're not going to mention that. So when you interact with those people, you obviously gather more intelligence about them and you deepen a relationship with them. You should try to store that information well, because that's all value to your business. And you can leverage that either online, even if you collect it manually, physically, when you meet these people. You may message them and be able to include that in your digital channels. And also, obviously, when your staff, if you have staff, communicate with them, or whether you choose to sell the business in the future, you're building equity, the knowledge, the data in your business and the processes in your business is all equity, is all value you're building in and baking into your system that you can use to resell, upsell, keep reducing the churn, so the amount of times they will change because they like you better. All of this knowledge, you need to collect it all.
Well, and I think, to summarize in general, that extra knowledge you're doing, it's helping you be relevant, right? It's
Sure.
When I was the Cub master for my son when he was in Cub Scouts, and I, of course, so I do automation, right? I was automating my text to people, and I noticed, not all the family, parents were showing up and the kids were showing up at meetings. So I automated. I had the adult name and the kid name, and so I automated sending text out. Hey, Ajay, looking forward to seeing Kartik tonight, and you at this meeting, blah, blah, blah. And the number of people that would write me back and say, great, and then they'd show up. It was amazing because they really thought I took the time out to write them. I included relevant pieces of information. Another one I suggested for my real estate agent is, hey, for everyone in your list, you have the city they're in easily. You have their name, right? We could automate, watch for weather in a given area. And when a hailstorm comes through, or even just twice a month, automate texting them, hey, Bob, I was just driving through Irving, which is, so you grab and you're piping in the city of where they are, right? So they feel like, oh, and I was thinking about you, hope things are going well, right? You stay there.
Right.
And it's,
well, another practical example of that, Joe, is let's use exactly that example. And let's say you are a roofer.
Yeah.
So you want to, and your roof needs fixing. So you want to message all those people in Irving when it's pouring down.
Right.
So it's top of mind. It's pouring down. It's Saturday morning, and the leak is leaking.
Right.
Because
the timeliness.
you know where they are. That's about timeliness. It's appropriate and it's relevant.
Yeah.
So tick, tick, tick. So that's why data, or the knowledge you have about these people, it may not be that they're even a customer, but when there's a hurricane coming through the Midwest, that's when to talk about building insurance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine, if you will, with that example you gave, but also you made note of the name of their dog, could you imagine if, like you said, I hope Freddie isn't too afraid of the lightning storm or whatever. I mean, the bonus brownie points you're going to score with these people, it's just amazing, right? Of the level, like by doing little stuff. I don't know if I told you this, Ryan, when at one point my son was interested in Taekwondo, and so I dropped by a local place here in the city, Capel, and I looked in. I was like, okay, it was interesting. I get home, and I think I was looking for their pricing on their website, and within like a minute of it, I get a phone call, and they're like, "Yeah, we saw you were looking at our website. Do you have any questions?" And I started talking to them about their program, and that every kid that comes in, they have them sign in an iPad showing they came in and what class they attended. They are tracking everything, and they are saying, hey, you have this many more things to level up to whatever. They are doing amazing stuff with their customers and keeping them and motivating them. I'm sure my son didn't want to do it, but I'm sure they actually also have a what's it called? Bring a friend kind of thing, bringing in other kids.
I think,
brilliant.
Yeah, as people are watching this, and if they're thinking, oh, it's not for me, my business can't do this, it's expensive, it's huge, the big companies do this.
Right.
Actually, I think you can reset your mind there, because actually a lot of these types of services we're talking about, if they are indeed services, are often web-based. They're often what's called software as a service, so they are a small monthly fee. And there's also a lot of free tools and free plans for small businesses. So I think you need to get into the mindset of recognizing the value of data, the application of it, and capturing this sort of information in a CRM, a customer relationship management tool of some kind, or even on a spreadsheet, just some sort of structured way that it can be acted upon in the future in marketing and messaging.
I would also add to that. I think you're spot on, Ryan. You can also choose on the scale of what you do with it, right? How deep you go. You don't have to be nitty gritty. When I was the director of research at Six Flags for a couple of years, and one of the parks in the Northeast had done a business mailer. They offer to rent the park to a business for a day, right? It's like 50 to 100 grand. And they had done a mailer and they weren't happy with the results. So I started talking to them about what they did, and they sent one mailer. And I said, what would have been great if we had done, tried a couple different ones and did tracking. They're like, oh, the tracking was going to be so expensive. And I'm like, so expensive? Like how? And they're like, well, they thought I meant tracking for each individual business, keeping a record of who received it and when they call it. And I said, no, I just mean you could have created, I think they did a 20,000 piece mailing. I'm like, you could have created 4 different tests and done mailers of 5,000 and had a different thing, and that's all the tracking, right? And at least it would have helped them understand the next time they did it, or maybe do the first 2 A/B tests, as you mentioned earlier, and then see which one does better, and then with the rest of 10,000, do the one that performed the best, right? And these are simple. It's not as you don't have to. I love the minutia, but you don't have to do that, right? There's easy ways to do some of the stuff, or to your point, if you know a little about technology or aren't afraid to do some Googling and learning, there's amazing stuff that's out there that is free or virtually free, or find a geek, right? Find someone that does it. There are clients, providers out there that will do this stuff for you. It's just, again, it's worth it, right? It's so worth it.
Yeah.
Let's take a look back over. I think it's in here. Oh, no, that was the other document. We had a few more. So we mentioned some of the geography, demographics. Here, just as an example, I give to people so they can start thinking about it. There's niche, like specific things that might have happened, right? That's aware. We all know this, right? The amount of data that's out there is insane, of what you can get. There's also something called the SRDS. I think it's a standard rate and data service. It's kind of a weird system. It's a service that they don't own the mailing lists, but they have hundreds of thousands of mailing lists that are available for rent and usage. They charge you, I think it's like $800 a year for access to see the list. So you don't even, for $800 a year, you don't even get to use the list. You just have access to see what lists are available. And then you would choose, and they have, it's actually called the data card. They have metrics on who's used it in the past, what the average purchase rate was, what the average dollar spent was, what really great info on how the list performed. Now, having said that, I mentioned it costs $800 to have access to SRDS. I looked, actually, I was fortunate enough, I asked my local library because they used to have access to it. My local librarian went out and found that TCU here in Texas, in their Dallas office, has public access to it. So I drove down to Fort Worth. It's 40 minutes away, but I drove down, went on site in the campus, and they had public computers that I could go in and look at the stuff for free. Right. So there are free ways to gain access to it. You don't have to spend the $800. If you want to do it from your own computer, you would.
And I think that's a really important point as well, that, you know, a lot of small businesses have a low budget. You know, you can be, these are not, a lot of these things are public databases, or they are, there's tools, ways that libraries are.
And list brokers.
So you don't have to necessarily, you've got to have the mentality and recognition that data is important, and then look at how you can source this. And even then, the more, a lot of these types of companies charge by the number of leads. And remember, what we're talking about here is to try to focus your energies on the number of people that will give you the greatest reward. And by implication, it's going to be smaller than it might otherwise be, because we're all focused as small business owners on our return on our investment. So the more clearly you can define your audience, actually often, even if it is a paid service, the lower the price will be, because you're retrieving less people, but hopefully higher value people who have a higher propensity to engage you in your services or your product.
This book, The Direct Mail Solution, it's from Craig Simpson. And I think maybe there's a couple chapters from Dan Kennedy. Yeah, with Dan Kennedy. Great book. It was really interesting because he talks about very specifically the lists you get, right? There are different types of lists. There's things like an inquiry list, a controlled circulation list, the paid circulation list. He also has a whole thing here on the benefits of targeting list testing. But and then there's the buyers list and attendance list. I have a great article from, I don't see the book in front of me here. I would show you. It's Gary Halbert. He goes through and talks about, there's all these different levels of how you know what, I'm going to find it and pull it up here. Let me do that real quickly.
So whilst Joe's doing that, just to get another example on context here with the niche activities, the lists can tell you, for example, who just bought a home. So they may have a need for building services, for example, but also you'll be able to tell the geography. You'll be able to tell potentially how many people live in the property, the price of the property, you know, the location, the proximity to other types of properties of a similar kind. So you can really start to get quite granular quite quickly. And if you're in a property type business, then data like that in your property services company can be really powerful.
Okay, so Gary Halbert, who is, for the most part, most people agree, he was like the world's best copywriter, right? He's amazing. But I loved this article, and it talks about different ways of running lists, right? So there's the first list. Hey, we could possibly, number one, we could get people whose names and addresses we get right out of the telephone book. Yeah, that list, yeah, you can get it. And he talks about it like that's, hey, it might work, especially for geography type, but it's not a very good list, right? Number two is we can mail them to the names that we had in the addresses from the phone book, but only those that live in a high income area, right? So especially if you're targeting more wealthy people, hey, that's going to do better, right? Then you could say, well, what if we did that same thing, but people that have a high income, but have above average incomes. So not just that they live in the area, but only those that have a certain income level or more, right? Oh, hey, this is getting better, right? The four is we could get a promotion to upper income people that are proven mail order buyers, right? And this was like a holy hell. Suddenly people who've bought in the past and we're doing a mailing to those people, that's going to really perform much, much like that alone right there. Like you could probably stop and say, that's great, but wait, there's more. We could do it to wealthy people. So not just everyone that's ordered, but maybe just wealthy people who've ordered, an investment book. So something similar to what you're selling, right? Now we're cooking with gas, right? Or we can do it to the wealthy people who've purchased by mail a product similar to ours, but they purchased several times, right? So again, it's a smaller list, but suddenly we're like, wow, these guys are really likely to be interested. Or we could do it for a list of wealthy people who purchased by mail and similar to ours several times and who've paid big money for what they bought, right? So the actual dollar value of what they bought, right? Same thing. I think it all kind of keeps adding on. Wealthy people who purchased by mail, similar to ours, who've done so repeatedly, who have paid for big purchase, and recency. So they recently did it, right? So that's like, holy hell, right? We could do our mailing list of those who characteristics number 8, and who our friendly list broker tells us is working like crazy. So other people have rented this list, right? So it's not just that, but it's also other people want. Now, what I absolutely loved after reading this article was the very best one, number 10, was just mailing to your DM customers, right? Was mailing to those before who you've already, because it really gets back to one of your biggest hurdles is that they're going to do business with you, right? And that's where he's like, hey, why don't you just target your own customers, right? I thought this was a brilliant walkthrough of like how you can niche it down at smaller, more specific, yet you're going to be more profitable, right? Yes. And now it gets back into maybe the most where you end up making the most money isn't number 9, right? Or number, it just depends, right? That's where you do some testing of each one.
That's right. That each one of these is most likely to be a smaller group of people.
Yeah.
But also, as you go further down and it gets smaller and smaller, the propensity to purchase is probably going to go up and up. Or and also the relevance of this group to you is going up. And the other thing to think about, I think, as you look through these lists that Joe's just shared, is to think that obviously it would be great to jump straight to number 9 or number 10, but not everyone always instantly thinks of this. Right. But it's okay, as long as you've got a big enough sample that you can test against. You can do it in iterations. You don't have, ideally, go straight for the highest value because you know it's the highest value group. But if you're trying to feel your way for what is the highest value group, think iteratively. Don't suddenly go and mail 30,000 people. Step by step, build the confidence in your sample. Test and retest. Even the biggest marketers and when Procter & Gamble, the maker of some of the biggest brands in the world, when they launch a television commercial, it goes into 1.5 years testing before it's released with focus groups and things. And so even that's the biggest advertiser in the world. Even the biggest advertisers in the world test and retest. So baby steps here. Okay. So don't jump right in the deep end, because we want to have the maximum return on investment we can. So we want to test in stages, iterate until you find that sweet spot, and then double down on it.
Yeah, when at TI, what I would tell people, and this is the other thing that drove me nuts at TI, they would our clients would go out, work with the marketing people, building their message and everything else, and this would take weeks or months, right, to actually get it done, and then they would come to me about targeting. And I'm like, I don't understand how you can even build your message if you don't understand who you're targeting, right? Like, do your targeting first and then build your message about the people you're targeting, right? And then because I literally couldn't write something if I don't know who my target audience is. I just thought like it just mentally doesn't work for me. So what I tell them too is in the targeting, like, let's start, who is the most very specific nitty gritty? Who is this? Now, if you don't think that's a big enough audience, let's back it the other way. Instead of starting at number 1, let's start at number 10 and work your way the other way until you think you got a big enough base, and yet it's still specific enough where you're not annoying too many people, right? You're going to, of course, it has to do with the cost of your channel, of what you're doing. But
the other sort of slightly counterintuitive thing to think about as you are trying to formulate in your mind this idea of your list or who your audience is, it's also valuable to think, another technique you can use is to think about who your audience most definitely is not. Because you can exclude groups of people. And just as we were talking about in one of our earlier episodes, we were talking about focusing on the 20% that make the money, and the 80% that don't, exclude them. You can think about that in the context of lists too. So historically, or contacts, if historically you find that servicing a particular type of customer is much less cost effective, or you absolutely don't want to focus in a particular area or a particular type, you can choose to exclude them as well. So this is another way you can approach it. If you're not completely sure who you should target, you can focus on excluding groups.
Well, and I'll even say it's like in Facebook, it's great. Now, some of these, some services, when you rent them, you actually get the list yourself, right? And so if you wanted to create an exclusion list, you'd have to rent that list as well. So you have a bigger cost. It's still probably worth it, right? But you could do it. Now, on things like Facebook, you can do exactly like you're saying for free, right? I can go in and create a different audience, and you actually do it entirely separately, right? You create an audience you don't want to target, and then when you go to do your ad, you say, target these, but exclude this list, and it's all free. There's no cost, right? So it's a great way to be able to do that without adding and incurring costs. The other thing, it just popped in my head, and I meant to mention it earlier, but it was a critical thing you said several times, but I want to add one level to it, was the whole understanding who's buying what. Bankers, I think, were one of the first ones to really implement this well. They would look at their customers and look at products that they would buy together, and then say, oh, out of all these 12 things well, let's do 10, I have 10 fingers. These 10 things that people buy, when they buy these 3, they typically buy, this one and this one. So you're down to 7 things. And then they go back and say, now, who are my customers who have some of these things, but not all? And it's an easy way to do the cross-sell of understanding the patterns of like, look, you've bought these other things. You really, most people that are buying these would also buy this, right? It's a great, easy way to.
Right. And here's a free tip I give you that people who have products they physically sell, if your product, whether you sell on Amazon or not, if your product is a type of product which is on Amazon, Amazon does exactly what Joe's describing. When you purchase a product, it tries to upsell you by giving you social proof that other people who bought product X, the product you're buying, also bought these other products. So they're trying to push you further into obviously adding more to your basket by recommending products that it thinks algorithmically, if that's a word, based on their purchasing algorithms, also buy these other products. So by association.
Who is the guy you turned me on to that does a lot of stuff? He mentioned stuff with Amazon, but he does have a lot of the tips and tricks of learning, like doing custom things, the studies he's done. Remember Nick?
Right, so there's a guy, and we'll call it up, maybe called Nick Colenda. He does a pricing strategy. It's absolutely superb. I would recommend anyone who has, whether you have challenges around pricing or not, he has a fantastic, he's now just launching a training school actually about the psychology of pricing. And many people obviously in retail know that, historically numbers ending in 9 are better than whole numbers and this sort of thing. But he has a list that we'll share with you that has, I think, 50 different pricing psychology techniques that have been proven by scientific research to increase the average sale price. So quite significantly improve the way that things work.
Yeah, it's very. I agree. He's got some really good stuff. Let's go to the Tango Mind. I think if you search for him in the Tango Mind, here's his.
Yeah,
book.
that's one of his books. Yeah, it's fantastic. The other resource, which is quite good in that regard, is called Price Intelligently, which is it's a software as a service, but they also have a very good blog, which refers to it, refers to how to manage your pricing strategies. And this comes again around trying to find something that works for the customer that will obviously hopefully help improve your sales chances. Joe, I've just sent you the link to the Nick Colenda resource.
I'll pull it up in 1 second. I'm trying to, that's weird. Maybe I loaded to somebody. Kennedy has a really good book on pricing also. It was one of the things that I realized later as a market researcher, that it's one of those things, I was doing what people asked. I should have done a better job of
in the chat.
Thinking. What's that?
In the chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you. What I should have done was understood more about what people should be learning and studying, because they weren't asking. They were asking questions more about the types of product or types of attributes you should have and this and that. And really, you know, especially around price, you should understand more about, well, what price do you want to set your product at? And then, you know, create a product that can justify that price.
And also, obviously, I mean, everyone would tell you this. I think you need to compete on, look at value and look at your competitors, which I think we'll touch on in another session. But this particular article by him on pricing psychology goes through 42 different ways that you can think about your pricing to optimize your success.
Yeah. Another great book, which is a simple one, was How to Sell a Lobster. And Bill Bishop talks about, it's a great example of in the movie industry where in pricing, you know, they used to have like one size drink and very few people bought it. And by adding like a medium and a large and a super large, how much more money they make, because people want, when they see a choice, no one wants to buy like the cheapest thing. You look cheap, but it's not. They'll buy the middle one. And even some buy the super large one, which is highly profitable.
Yes, this is one of the things that's included in here. It's very common. People, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this. This price anchoring, the idea of making one of them seem a little bit cheaper than it really is. And it's also a very clever way to upsell as well. So you are adding more value, but maybe for an incremental cost on you, but ratcheting up your average revenue per user or your average basket size if it's an online transaction.
Yeah, and that's where, again, sometimes if you're in a competitive market where price is everything, you can use that low price to get people in the door. And then after you get them in the door, you quickly explain why you really don't want that. That's not a good value, right? What you really want is this one, which is a little bit, you know, more expensive, but it has a lot more other things about it, right? But you use that low-hanging fruit to get their attention.
And it gives you an opportunity to differentiate on other bases, like on convenience or accessibility. So rather than, you might have a low price product proposition, but you may have a higher one that has more, so it has more things attached with it. So you know, you don't have to just compete on price. You might compete on convenience, so it's easier for someone to do something if they buy the higher priced one.
Yeah, well, one of the most important things, right, is you differentiate, and that's another recent Trout book. No, actually, I think that's just Jack Trout. Differentiate or die. In their whole thing on concept is positioning, though, and be different. And if you're viewed as a commodity, you can't charge a different price. It's so hard, right? And so, you know, one is never offer, you know, even on Amazon, right? You bundle together with a couple of things. Don't offer just this exact same thing. Offer this plus something else, even if it's a great warranty, right? Which is another great thing you can have in there. People start going, well, they're not really apples to apples, right? There's something else this person's offering me, and it can justify the higher price. But yeah, anyway, a lot of great stuff.
Amazon is a difficult because you're not adding value as a service. I mean, obviously your product is available on Amazon, which is the service. So you can't, there's no margin improvement there. You're just literally selling a widget, and you can differentiate by selling a different type of widget or bundling it, which is a very common technique, as you say.
Yeah. All right, but let's get back into some of these other things. So the niche and specific activities, right? Psychographic, attitudinal stuff. That's another one back in that SRDS. There's also, by the way, I think I have a bookmark to one of them. Here we go. I forget what this one's actually called. NextMark is now, it's like a free alternative to the SRDS. You can come in here and look at lists that you can rent. But it's one that you can just go look around. It's amazing what's available in today's day and age, right? Of how you can target stuff. Or of course you can create your own, and then, you know, like that's what I do a lot is I will create something that is people are interested in, and then just to get them to like it or to look at it. Like actually, Ryan, I think you and I chatted about this. You were the one sharing it with me, right? The video, create a video, and as long as people watch 3 seconds of the video, you can do retargeting to them after. So
that's right.
It's a super easy way to get, you know, do something fun, but it's on, like that's where, let me get back to the Word doc, not that Word doc, the affinity groups, right? These are rich, like, hey, you know, the people, they have said themselves, this is the kind of group, this is who I belong with. It's like your things. And
you absolutely want to think about that. You want to think about how do people self-identify as potential customers of yours? How do they, as Joe was saying, are there communities of people, whether they're on social media, whether they're in a commerce group, whether they're in a meetup group, that identify as people who might be positively disposed to your product, and how can you put your message in front of them?
Right. Yeah, and actually, so Ryan showed me. Well, you gave me the link to the guy, I think, but anyway, there was the Facebook groups, and so I think that tool was Dig, is what I ended up using. But you can go to a Facebook group and export a list. Now, when I say it's a list of people, it has like their name, a link to their Facebook page, kind of thing, right? But the fact that you can you can see there's 5,000 people in this list, and maybe you get 4,000 of them. But here are people who say this is what I focus in. Right, it's an amazing way to be able to go in, and then of course you can append data once you have basics like a first last name and a city or something, or maybe an email address or a social link. If you have this, especially the social link, right, because it's a unique our ID, you can go to services and say, give me their phone numbers or give me their email addresses or their mailing address, and there are ways to target them. Again, which actually kind of alludes. Let's go ahead and bring this in here, and then we'll try to. Well, all right, the next one's too. But the media consumption, bring it into which channel are you going to target? Because does your certain group use a certain medium more often than others? When I was at Six Flags, I did a study of a given market, and we did, instead of talking to our customers, which is what the vast majority of research I did for them, I said, let's go out and let's do a market study and get customers and non-customers, and let's get enough of both. This is the critical part, right? So we get enough of both, and then we can say, well, let's compare customers to non-customers on what radio station they're listening to, or what like fast food places they're going, because Six Flags often partners with local fast food places, right, to sell stuff. And so I had radio stations, I had newspapers, I had grocery stores, I had fast food places, and I was able to show them, hey, compared to the general population, here is where people who go to Six Flags are doing this stuff. And the guys that were in charge of these markets, they were blown away. They're like, oh my God, my only question is, can you do this for the rest of the 30 markets we're in? Because it allowed them, they had never seen anything like this. And they're like, this is insane. It's so easy to make better informed decisions on where to spend our money. These corporate graphics, lastly, is of course, if you're targeting, if you're doing B2B, now keep in mind, right? At TI, this drove me nuts a lot. Well, we're B2B. You know what? Who's at the other business? It's people, right? It's always people. You sales and everything and marketing, it's person to person. Now, it might be a business person, and there might be the differences, of course, with businesses. Could be several decision makers, and gatekeepers. It's a more complex model, but it's still people, and they get motivated by mostly emotion, right? It's they want data. People, that was one of Joseph Sugarman's books. I don't think I pulled it. This is a great one. Is it Sugarman? Yeah, this is his. It was a great. It's like a book to work through, and so it was a lot of fun. But he has one that I guess I didn't pull it, but it's on triggers, and he covers a lot of it. But basically, he's saying people make decisions based on emotion, and then look for data to back up their decision. But the decisions usually, more often than not, they're not made on the actual data. They're made emotionally, and then later they look for justification after the fact. You think we're covered enough on this one?
I think so. Yeah, I think we're good.
Cool. All right, let me